Welcome to Knittings and Sewings, Episode 4. I'm Shelley from the Kansas City, Missouri area, and I wanted to welcome all of you who are newly finding this podcast. In this particular episode, we're going to talk about several different things, especially my knittings and sewings. But this is the place where we are multi-craftal in the fiber arts, and the kind of things I do as fairly routine are knitting, sewing, spinning, weaving, crochet, and even occasionally dyeing. So we will talk about all those things in various episodes. But in this one, I want to start off by welcoming you back if you are coming back. Last time we covered how to wear a shawl. And so if you haven't seen that episode yet, you may want to go back to that on the link we're going to provide, because I do think that is a helpful thing for those who do make shawls and don't know how to wear them. In this episode, we're going to start by taking what I call a new look back. I want to talk to you about what I'm currently wearing. This I call the Parfait dyed skirt, and I'll tell you why in just a moment. There's going to be what is kind of a long story, but hopefully it'll all make sense by the time I talk about the creative process that went into making this skirt. The reason I'm calling it a new look back is because I actually sewed this skirt this time last year, almost exactly at this time in January. I was wanting to make a skirt because I didn't have a lot of skirts and wanted to make more skirts and pants. So this skirt evolved because originally it started 3 or 4 years ago, when my weaving guild, the Arrow Rock Guild, every year we do a dye day, and we had dyed these fat quarters that we called parfait dyeing. That was a lesson one of the members gave us on how to do parfait dyeing, and we dyed a wide variety of little fat quarters. I'm not a quilter, but that's what I understand these are called. 1/4 of an inch sections of fabric. And I did 5 or 6 of them, and I liked how they turned out, but I didn't know what to do with them. For a long time, I had them folded up in my stash, and I would look at them each year as I went through my stash, which I often do in January or late December. And each year I'd look at them and admire them, but I really didn't know how to put them into a garment. And I knew they were very special, and I wanted to make them have a special feature in some garment I could make. But I just kept looking at it and setting it aside, as often happens with my creative process. And then last year, when I was wanting to make a skirt, I was in Joann's shopping, and I came upon some fabric. I was specifically looking for fabric for a skirt. And this geometric fabric I stumbled upon while in this section of the fabric section. And what appealed to me a lot about this is the geometric shapes that were in it. The diamonds, the squares, the little circles. I'm very drawn to geometry and geometric shapes. So I immediately wanted to purchase this fabric, and I also went ahead and bought a very easy skirt pattern, and that is called, I want to be sure and I will link it, but it's called New Look, and it's a whole line on the turnstile in Joann's, and it's number 6623. It's a basic skirt pattern with an elastic waist. And so that's what I was looking for, because I generally will wear a top over my waist, and so I didn't need to have a waistband on the skirt. So I bought the skirt, bought the pattern, bought the fabric, and I was on my way up to the checkout line. Luckily, there was a little bit of a wait, because while I have the skirt pattern on top of the fabric, all of a sudden something popped into my head from the ancient past. When I was in 1st grade, I had a teacher once who was teaching us basic geometric shapes, and she was having us do that by doing a little art project. She gave us black construction paper and some white chalk, and we were to trace around triangles, rectangles, circles, and then cut them out in the center. Then we took brightly colored construction paper, put it in the background to make the shapes appear like a kind of a stained glass window effect. Well, all of a sudden, as I'm standing in line at Joann's, that picture of me doing that project popped into my head, and I realized, oh my goodness, I can take this fabric, cut out the little shapes inside, and then put the the Parfait dyed fabric behind it, and then sew those in place and create a whole fabric, which I'm going to show you here in a second. A whole fabric based on, here we go, by putting, you can go a little bit, I'll go a little bit closer up on this, by inserting the fabric behind the cutout shape, I could create this unique fabric. And I worked on this, I'll tell you, I did 1 or 2 little patches a night after work for the whole month of January. It took me the whole month to get this in place. I cut out my fabric pieces, and then I did my piecing. I don't know what this is called in quilting, there may be a name for it, but I basically did my insertion and sewing 2 or 3 pieces at a time until I had the whole front and the back of the skirt together into a parfait or stained glass effect on the fabric. Then only after I completed both the front and the back of the skirt pieces was I then able to go ahead and sew the skirt, which took very little time with only having 2 pieces and some elastic. It went together in sewing very quickly. But I've been wearing this now for a year. I really like it. There are some things that I would do differently maybe now that I've experienced the process. But I think this is a concept that I very much will repeat in the future on other projects. I found it really fun, and I think the skirt turned out great. Welcome back to the section I'm going to call Languishing Sock. And the reason it's going to be called that is because every year I tend to knit somewhere between 2 and 3 socks per year. That's my average. I'm not especially a speedy knitter, but I do like to have my sock drawer full of hand knit socks. I have very small, sensitive feet with bunions that tend to get very sore if I don't have the comfort of a hand knit sock. And so once again, as the new year started, toward the end actually, last year, right there at the week between Christmas and New Year's, I cast on another pair of socks. And I decided I needed some very basic blue socks to wear with my denim jeans, because the staples in my wardrobe every day tend to be wearing blue jeans, even to work. And then I always wear a pair of hand knit socks. And then I have usually a shawl or a cardigan that I wear to work. So that's kind of my uniform for work and weekends. And so I decided, wow, I really need a pair of blue jean socks. So I decided to take some stash out of my sock yarn, and I started with an old stash, Magic Stripes, and this is a Magic Stripes by Lion Brand, very old yarn. And then also for my stash, I had some denim-y yarn that has shades of light blue, dark blue, and a little bit of lavender. So I decided to combine these into a sock. And I used the pattern, the Vanilla Latte Socks by Virginia Rose Jeans. And this is an excellent, very basic ribbed sock pattern, which I downloaded in 2021. However, I didn't get started on it, like I said, until this year. So, unfortunately, this sock pattern is no longer available on Ravelry. For some reason, she did pull it down. And so, I can tell you, though, it's more of a formula or a various options rather than an actual pattern. You can probably, with any basic ribbing pattern, do a similar thing. But it starts off up here. I had, I think, a 3x2 rib. And then it goes to a 6x2 rib for the leg of the sock. It's a cuff down basic sock. And then she does give you several options for the heel. Several different, whether you have a slip stitch heel or a eye of partridge heel. There's 3 options. And then on the toe, there's 2 options. So it is a nice basic pattern. And I got to work on this, like I said, at the very beginning of the year, end of last year. Then, as often happens with socks for me, this somehow got placed on the back burner. And I know why. It was because I was doing, the whole month of January, I was doing the coasters, the woven mug rugs that we talked about in the last episode. I managed to weave 34 of those mug rugs, and I'm going to insert a picture here of the a few of the finished mug rugs. But because I got so occupied with doing those, I put aside the sock. And in fact, it was not only at the back burner, it was totally off the burner. Because when I went to pick them up to knit again, once I finished the mug rugs, and I was going to take these to work on at a doctor's appointment, I couldn't find them anywhere. And they ended up languishing under a pile by my nightstand where I have some books and yarn and my journal. I just put them aside in the pile and other things got piled on top of them. So they had become out of sight, out of mind. So I had to unearth them before I could even get started working on them again. Then I decided I need to find a way to make these a little bit more top of mind. So I did cast on a second one so I can knit the 2 socks concurrently. So I will do a cuff and a cuff, a leg and a leg, a heel and a heel, a foot and a foot, and finally a toe and a toe. By the end, I hope to have 2 socks done at once, or almost at the same time, without having to have 2 socks literally on the same needle, which I find kind of cumbersome. I know people make 2 socks at the same time, but for me, they get a little bit weighty and they get tangled and just too awkward for me to deal with. So this way, I think I'm going to be speeding up my process a little bit. And another thing that I did to make it a little bit speedier and more top of mind is I moved the socks onto the top of my desktop in my home office. So hopefully whenever I'm watching knitting podcasts, as I often do, I will have the motivation and have it right in front of me to easily pick up these socks and work on them while I'm watching my other YouTubes. Another thing that's motivating me to want to get on these a little bit more is because Stephen West has now put out, he started designing socks, and he has made a painting brick sock that is absolutely one I want to make. It's darling, and so I will have a link to that. He's put out a sock ebook where he is going to publish 1 new sock design a month, and you can purchase the whole book or the individual pattern. So I will link to that as well. Stephen also has a, on his website, you can take a sock knitting workshop. If you want to learn how to knit socks, you've never knit them before, he's an excellent teacher and you might want to investigate that. And as far as not having the pattern for the blue jean, or the, I call blue jean socks, but they're actually called Vanilla Latte Socks by Virginia Jeans. She no longer has the pattern published that I can find. However, she does have a series of YouTubes I'll link to where she shows you how to step by step make basic socks out of this design, out of this pattern. So if you would like to see her YouTubes, you can reconstruct how to make these socks if you choose to do that. Now we will talk about my Penguono progress. I started this Penguono project and we had a few inches finished the last time on episode 3. But I have completed the back section and wanted to show you, there are all these stripes, but basically in the theme of fuchsia and some purples and some other mixed in colors, olives and navies. And these are going to be my themes that will recur throughout the jacket. The Penguono is named because it is a kimono style loose fitting jacket that Stephen West designed. And people have been knitting this for, I think, around 5 years now when he first came out with it. It's his favorite design. Originally, I think he came out with it in 2017. So you can see a lot of examples on Ravelry of how people have made the jacket. I decided to make all of my stripes in a basic fuchsia color theme. However, a lot of other people have made 2 separate color blocks. If you would like 2 distinct color blocks, like a navy on top and a peach on the bottom, or whatever you want to do, there's a lot of chance to customize according to your own taste. But it's all seed stitch on this section, and I used, in order to figure out my colorways, I started with one of my stash items was a Ferris wheel acrylic yarn by Lion Brand. And the neat thing about using this colorway like this, where it has several colors, is it gave me ideas of what would go together well. And it has some coppers, coppery orange, some magenta, bright pink, as well as olive, and some navy. There's a lot of different colors in this. And that gave me the jumping off point to give me ideas of what all I wanted to include as my colors within the jacket. And so for me, I have completed the back and now moved on to completing one section of the welts on the side. There will be these same welts on the other side, and I'm using colors of chartreuse, pink, and purple. And again, like the rest of the jacket, you're often combining 2 to 3 different yarns to get to the weight of yarn you need for your jacket. Mine is a heavy worsted or light chunky. And I'm producing that by sometimes combining, like these are 2 worsted weight yarns that go together to make the green. And for the pink in the middle, I used a hand spun yarn I made, but I had to use strand from the inside and the outside because I needed to combine the 2 to make the heavier yarn that I needed for this project. And then for the purple, I actually combined 3 different yarns. I have this as probably a light worsted weight, and then there was this bright glitzy, this kind of a DK weight, and then lastly I combined a fingering weight, which I don't see right now. But 3 different yarns went into the making of the purple. So that's kind of how you do through this whole project. You're combining yarns, so it turns out really fun. I'm enjoying the process immensely, and I'm making more progress than I expected. So I'm looking forward to next moving to the sides, the lower sides here, and we'll continue showing you my progress as we go along. And I will mention, if you would like to, Stephen does have a whole workshop. Not only does he have a pattern, but he does support it with a workshop. If you would like to take it, you do have to pay for that. I think it's around $40 US dollars, maybe a little more, but somewhere around there. You can decide if you would like a step-by-step through the Penguono. You can do that. But the pattern also is very educational, and you can certainly do it by just buying the pattern. I really recommend this project. I'm having a great time already, and I'm seeing myself incorporating some of my spring colors that I'll be using in my spring wardrobe as I've started planning that. So thanks a lot for checking on my progress, and I can't wait to show you what I've finished next time. Now we're going to talk about the long-held question, chicken or the egg? When we were children, we all heard an older grandparent or different adults saying to us about which came first, the chicken or the egg. And this is part of our creative process, actually. There are times that I have a chicken in when I'm planning a project, and that's, for example, the Penguono. The Penguono jacket has been on my queue on Ravelry now for several years, and I just kept pushing it back and never getting around to it. But it is definitely something where the chicken popped up first in that instance. I wanted to make the garment, and then I went to my stash, which is the egg, the materials and so forth. I came to pick the stash that would match the project from there. There are other projects, such as the Parfait dyed skirt that I showed you. I'm still wearing it, but that whole process I described to you was an example of where it started probably with an egg, but that was the Parfait dyed fabric, but it kind of had to stay 2 or 3 years in my head and in my vision before I actually came together with a project, which was the skirt, that new look skirt. So that's an example of kind of an evolving process, an evolving egg to chicken. And then there's other things that definitely start with the egg and move into the chicken. That is an example of my current project that I've just started warping on my loom, which is going to be a hand woven fabric that I'm going to eventually turn into something. It could end up being a skirt. It could end up being a pair of pants. It might even be a tunic or a dress. I really don't know yet, and I won't know until I'm able to produce the fabric. Very often with my hand-woven garments, that's how they begin, as fabric-centric. I first focus on the fabric. So what have I started doing? I first wound the warp, and what I wound, this started with years ago, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago, at my Arrow Rock Weaving Guild D-Stash, one of the other members came up to me and offered me this, it's actually, I don't know if it's wool, to be honest, or alpaca. It's definitely some kind of animal fiber, and it's sticky, I can tell you that. Because with having this January very dry weather we've had here in Kansas City, we've had a drought kind of condition. Very little snow, lots of cold weather, and lots of very dry air and dry ground. So in this kind of weather, as I was winding this warp, I've quickly realized that it probably has, because it's so sticky, it probably has some kind of fiber in it that is making it that sticky. It is good solid yarn to use for a warp. It isn't easily broken, so it's pretty durable. But as I wound the warp, that was the first thing that occurred to me. And as I continue working with this project, I'm going to eventually figure out more about it and how it goes together with the other. This is going to be the warp. This is, I know where this came from. It was a yarn barn mill end, it's called. A mill end is where a mill had some yarn left from a run that they did, and they have leftovers. They produce too much. From what I understand, mill ends are becoming harder to get. As technology advances, mills are more able to carefully plan their production, and so there's less likely to have mill ends. And Yarn Barn has been having trouble in recent years getting mill ends. I don't think they no longer have a large mill end section. But a few years ago, Bob bought me some mill ends, and this is one of them I just adored. And I have actually two different cones of these mill ends. This is a very boucle yarn that is made of, the base of it is kind of a brownish olive grounding yarn, and then it has these little tiny mauve flecks, which I will show you more in a close-up that we'll put in later. But it's a very soft mauve fleck that is in here as part of the boucle. And it's a boucle texture. This definitely is not one that you would want to have as warp, because as you can see, it tears apart very, very easily. You want to use warp that is firm and strong. And so this is not for warp, this is for weft. So the weft goes, whereas the warp goes up and down, this is weft that goes across. And I'm going to have a weft facing fabric, so this is going to be what you mainly see when I finish the fabric, and I predict. We won't totally know till I produce the fabric, but that is how this idea came about, is wanting to use these two yarns in combination to make a fabric for some kind of garment. And again, I don't know what exactly yet. So that is going to be in the process. What I've been doing, I have completed winding the warp, which is making chains, 4 different chains, and that's what you see here, 1, 2, 3, 4. I made 4 different chains of 72 yarns, 8 feet long. And this is going to go across making about a 24-inch fabric on the loom. Right now I've started threading through these little slots. This is called a reed. And that is what you see, that I've been putting the little yarns through the slots. This is a 12-dent reed, so there are 12 little threads in each inch. Each slot has one of the threads. And that is going to be with this work that we already talked about. That's what's going through there. And then I'm almost finished threading these threads through the reed. Next, we're going to be going to the back of the loom where I'm sitting, and we're going to be threading these heddles, the steel little pieces right here. It's going to be thread a straight draw 1, 2, 3, 4. If any of you are weavers, you'll know what that means. They're kind of sticking up right now because I'm going to be at the back of the loom threading them through the back, the heddles. Then after that, the yarn is going to be wound around the back here. There's a thing called a beam, which is a round circular thing, and it's going to be wound around it and then be ready to, eventually I'll tie it together and it will make cloth. Hopefully by the next time you visit, we will have the whole thing set up and maybe a little fabric started, so you can see what the fabric will look like. Right now it's a mystery to me as much as it is to you. And I will be thinking, as I'm making the fabric, I will be thinking about what it wants to become in terms of a chicken. What kind of chicken is it going to be? To wrap things up today, I just want to have you think about for a moment what project you might have had languishing in a pile, or in a knitting bag, or in a closet. What have you put on the back burner that you might want to move up, or at least take another look at? If it's something that you really think you don't want to work on anymore and that it's not for you, maybe even consider ripping it out. But if it's something you want to activate and get moving on again, what is that project? Tell me in the comments. Let me know. And also, if the next time what we're going to cover is we're going to talk about spring makes. We are getting on the threshold of spring now, at least in North America. And so I'm already, as you can tell, starting to think about what projects I might want to start or move forward with for spring. And we'll be talking about how to create a capsule wardrobe for yourself, and that will be in the next episode. So before we go, I just want to remind you to love what you're making and wear what you're making. Till next time, see you later.